I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my 20 favorite picks on Underdog Fantasy for round 7 through 12. And if you don't play on Underdog Fantasy, that's okay. You'll still find a lot of value in this show because one thing that I like to tell people is ADP matters, but it's not everything. I think a good instructive example before we dive in is Puka Nacua from last year. Puka Nacua was often undrafted. Maybe you took him in round 15, final pick of your fantasy league. If for some reason you had taken him in round 7 last year, you'd still be like, well, that was a great pick. That's ultimately what we're trying to find is these middle round players that can perform at times like early round players and give us those spike weeks. Sure, we're probably not going to get the consistency of a Puka Nacua, but we can try our best to at least find some pockets of spike weeks, some guys that can deliver in weeks 15, 16, 17 of the fantasy playoffs. Let's dive right in. Round 7. I cannot stop drafting Christian Watson. His ADP is 73. So last year, Christian Watson was a 4th round pick when we didn't know if Jordan Love was good or not. Jordan Love was second in the NFL in passing touchdowns last year, despite a lot of injuries to the receiving corps, despite him playing with a very, very young skill position group. So now we know Jordan Love, certifiably good. Christian Watson was targeted on 20% of his routes last year at an average depth of target over 15 yards downfield. He was targeted at the 6th highest target depth on a good amount of his routes. If you hate the numbers, just think about it like this. Christian Watson essentially had the role we hope that Jameson Williams can sniff. Not many players in this range of the draft can finish as a top 3 weekly scorer at the position. We know Christian Watson can definitely do it. He has that upside. I like Alvin Kamara, ADP 77. He averaged 14 carries, nearly 7 targets per game last year. That's nearly 21 opportunities per game. He was 5th in fantasy points per game in half PPR, and it was behind only Christian McCaffrey, Kyren Williams, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert. There's still not much in the Saints backfield behind him. Once again, for the second offseason in a row, Kendre Miller is almost getting anti-hype. The beat reporters, they don't seem to like his work ethic. They don't seem to like his vision. And then there's also just not much in the Saints pass attack after Chris Olave and then Rashid Shaheed. We know that running back target share, it's partly earned, and then it's partly how good or bad are the receivers. And when receivers are bad, running backs get more targets. Alvin Kamara had a 19% target share last year, 2nd among running backs. It is not hard to see that happening again. It's the last year of his contract. The Saints are incentivized to use him. And I'm incentivized myself, Josh Larky, to draft Kyler Murray. His ADP is 80. He was the quarterback 3 in points per game in 2020. The quarterback 4 in 2021. The quarterback 7 in points per game in 2022. Then he tears his ACL. Then he comes back from his ACL in the second half of last season. He's got no supporting cast. Marquise Brown's in and out of the lineup with injuries. There's nothing there. And he's still the quarterback 8 in fantasy points per game. The team just added wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. at pick 4 in the draft. He's got easy top 5 upside in Kyler Murray. Round 8. I love drafting Jonathan Brooks at ADP 87. The team, the Panthers, traded up in round 2 in the mid-40s of the draft to select him as the first running back off the board. New Panthers head coach Dave Canales was the Bucs offensive coordinator last year, and he gave Rachaad White all the touches. It didn't matter if Rachaad White was good, was bad, was efficient, inefficient. Rachaad White, he just rode him to the ground. Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL last year at the University of Texas at Austin. He's supposedly healthy and ready for week 1. For those that didn't watch UT Austin games, that's okay. He's got shades of Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones to his game. Those are the common play style comps. Bryce Young is small. He's immobile as a quarterback. He's probably going to check the ball down often to Jonathan Brooks. I think Jonathan Brooks is also going to get the goal line carries over Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders. Carolina doesn't really trust either of them. So if he's getting goal line carries, he's probably going to get early down work. They traded up in round 2. It's just he's getting targeted by Bryce Young. He's getting everything. And I'm also generally bullish on Carolina's offense with the additions they made this year to the interior offensive line, to the receiving room. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They traded up in the draft at the end of round 1 for wide receiver Xavier Legette. Jonathan Brooks is one of my 5 highest rostered overall players. I also really like Zach Moss, ADP 93. He was the 5th best per carry runner according to Next Gen Stats player tracking data last year, with 183 carries as his sample size. we've got a great offense in Cincinnati. I think he gets most of the early down work. There's a chance for more targets than expected, even without third down work, since Burrow's probably going to dump the ball off a lot when under pressure. It's really ticking up for Zach Moss, who's currently competing just with late round rookie from last year, Chase Brown, for touches. Round 9, Jordan Love. His ADP is 98. He's got the second most touchdown passes in the NFL last year, as I mentioned before when I talked about Christian Watson. Youngest skill position group in the league. He's still really, really efficient. He's still putting up big fantasy numbers. He was the quarterback 5 per game last year. He's got room to grow. So if he was the fantasy quarterback 5 per game last year, we had injuries a lot of the year to Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, tight end Luke Musgrave. I think this year there's a true path for Jordan Love to have 4,500 passing yards, 250 to 300 rushing yards, and 40 or more total touchdowns. Another quarterback I like in this round. If Jordan Love's not your flavor, what about the mobile rookie Jayden Daniels? ADP 101, second overall pick in the draft this past year. Caleb Williams went 1 to the Bears. Jayden Daniels goes at pick 2 to the Commanders. I think we can get rookie year Anthony Richardson, where you just pray for health from Jayden Daniels. Though Daniels is a much more polished passer, was arguably a better supporting cast than what Richardson had last year. Because remember, when Richardson was playing, he didn't have Jonathan Taylor. It was just Michael Pittman, rookie Josh Downs. There really wasn't that much there. Jayden Daniels won the Heisman last year at LSU. His stats are absolutely insane. Jayden Daniels last year averaged 318 passing yards per game. Wow. But I mentioned he was mobile. He had 95 rushing yards per game as well. Fantasy cheat code is within his range of outcomes. We could be looking at the next Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts type fantasy asset. I also, in round 9, really like Josh Palmer. His ADP is 105. He's played 11 games with no Keenan Allen in his career. He's averaged 5 catches and 60 yards per game. You want me to do the math? Fine. Over a 17-game season, that's 85 catches and more than 1,000 receiving yards. Sure, the Chargers are probably going to be a run-heavy team. I'm going to get into that more later in the show, but someone's got to catch passes from Justin Herbert. Folks, I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. Before I get into rounds 10, 11, and 12 to end the show, a quick word from our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. Let's hit round 10. We've already covered round 7, 8, 9 of my middle round players to target. Let's hit round 10, 11, 12. Let's get you out of here. I love in round 10, another quarterback, Caleb Williams, ADP 112. So he's the first overall pick in the recent draft. He goes to the Chicago Bears, and he gets this historic supporting cast for a first overall pick. Usually first overall picks go to the worst team in the NFL the prior year, and they usually have no talent. But that's not true. Caleb Williams has DJ Moore. The team traded for Keenan Allen. The team drafted at 9th overall Romo Dunze, a potential superstar. We have the best wide receiver trio in the NFL. Caleb Williams also has the potential to be a Deshaun Watson level runner at the NFL level, where he's running 5 to 6 times a game, maybe 500 rushing yards on the season. I think Caleb Williams has legitimate top 8, if not top 5 fantasy point per game upside on the Bears. I also like it running back Blake Corum, ADP 117. He was taken in round 3 of the NFL draft. Now, at worst, he's the handcuff to Kyren Williams, who just had his 3rd foot injury of the past 2 years earlier this summer. Kyren's a poor pass blocker. Blake Corum's probably really good at pass blocking. He is really good at bench press reps. The dude had 25 bench press reps. That was the same as the Chargers' 5th overall pick, offensive tackle Joe Alt. It's insane. Blake Corum led all running backs at the combine. The big boy, Braylon Allen of the Jets rookie that everyone talks about because he's 240 pounds, he actually bench pressed fewer reps than the 208-pound Blake Corum. Blake Corum's a little muscle hamster. Protecting Matthew Stafford is important for the Rams. So maybe Kyren's just still struggles at pass blocking. Corum sees the field early. Maybe Kyren gets hurt like he did last year. I think Blake Corum's going to be a fantasy RB1 anytime Kyren's hurt. Blake Corum also can handle high volume. He handled 18.5 carries per game over the past 2 years at Michigan. I like Trevor Lawrence, ADP 119. He's had back-to-back seasons with over 4,000 passing yards. He's averaged over 300 rushing yards per season as well. I don't think people realize how good it's been. He had 30 total touchdowns in 2022 before offensive line injuries and his own ankle sprain, Christian Kirk's injuries, Zay Jones's injuries limited his production last year. I think his low ADP just kind of reflects that he hasn't reached expectations yet, and it's clearly frustrated drafters, and they're revolting. But I still think he can make another leap forward from his 2022 season this upcoming year. And ultimately, the past 2 years haven't even been that bad. People have just been frustrated because they want more. And I think he can give you more. And he's already given you the quarterback 12 in fantasy points per game and the quarterback 13 in fantasy points per game the past 2 seasons. One more player I like in round 10. Hold your nose. Hold your nose, folks. Because we are still, or I guess I at least, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm still drafting Mike Williams, ADP 120. He was so Underdog Fantasy's half PPR. He was the wide receiver 11 in half PPR points per game in 2021. He was the wide receiver 21 in half PPR points per game in 2022. He was the wide receiver 12 last year in his 3 games. So wide receiver 11, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 12. Decent chance he's going to be ready for week 1 because he tore his ACL in week 3 of last year. He's playing on the Jets now with Aaron Rodgers. He's got strong quarterback play. Garrett Wilson is the only true target competition on the roster right now. I know it feels gross, but Mike Williams, value in a half PPR best ball format like Underdog Fantasy. If you don't like that, you can bark at me on Twitter at Larky Tweets. Let me know what you think. DMs are open. Round 11. I talked about how I'd circle back to the Chargers. Here we go. We're circling back to Gus Edwards. ADP 121. New Chargers running back. So first, the infrastructure. New head coach Jim Harbaugh has a history of extremely run-heavy offenses. New offensive coordinator Greg Roman was with the Ravens for the first few seasons of Lamar Jackson's career, and he coached Gus Edwards there, so he has familiarity with his game. Chargers have arguably the best offensive tackle duo in the NFL. They've got Rashawn Slater, and then 2024's 5th overall pick, Joe Alt, at the bookends for tackles. Gus Edwards, he's getting up there. He's in his late 20s, but he's coming off arguably, if not arguably, definitely his best season. Sure, the yards per carry wasn't quite over 5 like it had been in some prior years, but still, 198 carries. He had 810 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns. The only other running backs right now on the Chargers roster that look like they might be active for week 1 could be J.K. Dobbins coming off the Achilles tear, and then pass catcher Kamani Vidal, who's a 6th-round rookie. Dontavian Wicks, the wide receiver's ADP is 122. He's a 5th-round rookie last year. He somehow finishes with a target on 20.5% of his routes, which is a shade ahead of Christian Watson. Though, to be fair to Watson, it was a much lower depth of target for Dontavian Wicks. He was the wide receiver 24 last year in per route efficiency, yards per route run. I think Wicks can win the wide receiver 3 job ahead of Romeo Doubs and behind Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. Watson could get injured. I love him in round 7, but hey, he's a risky pick. Maybe he gets injured, and suddenly you're looking at the wide receiver 2 for Jordan Love and Dontavian Wicks. He had nearly 600 receiving yards last year as a 5th-round rookie. He only reached a 50% snap share in 7 games last year and still had nearly 600 receiving yards. The ceiling's probably higher than you think. Jerry Jeudy's ADP is 124. I'm drafting him. He was a 5th-round fantasy pick last year on the Broncos. He struggled with injuries. He struggled with production last year. Target share was still 20. But he didn't score fantasy points because he only caught 2 touchdowns despite over 750 receiving yards. He got traded to Cleveland this offseason. He's immediately signed by them to a 3-year, $52 million extension. Deshaun Watson should be improved from last season. This is his first actual offseason to play and practice with the Browns. I'm going to bet on a talented player in Jeudy, who I think has potentially just gotten really unlucky with injuries. He's probably playing the slot in Cleveland. That's where he performs best. Hold your nose, folks. All right, I've got one more round 11 guy before we get into round 12. You're going to hate this, but I'm legally obligated to say it because of the opportunity. Ezekiel Elliott's ADP is 125. And I think he might be the Cowboys' good offense starting running back. He had over 950 total yards last year on the Patriots. He was the RB9 in fantasy points per game the final 5 games of last year when he was the starter due to Ramondre Stevenson's injury. 2 years ago, he was over 950 total yards again. He had 12 rushing touchdowns that in 2021 when he was on the Cowboys. He was the RB21 per game on the season. I think what you saw from Gus Edwards last year, 800 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, I think that's what Zeke is giving you this year. Great pick in round 11. Round 12, the final round for these middle rounds. We will be back next week with the late rounds, my favorite picks. Everyone wants the sleepers. Josh, give me a sleeper. I'll hit rounds 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 next week on the Dominator. I'm Josh Larky. Round 12, we got Pat Freiermuth. The tight end's ADP is 134. He's probably the number 2 option in the passing game for Russell Wilson behind only George Pickens. Remember, Deontay Johnson's a Carolina Panther now. Pat Freiermuth, yeah, it might be a run-heavy offense, but I still think he's got a sneaky path to around 100 targets. He dealt with injuries last year, but his first 2 years in the league, he looked like a Dallas Goedert type, a guy that can actually make a difference for you on a week-to-week basis in fantasy football. Russell Wilson, also to his credit, has always been a very high touchdown rate quarterback. I am also drafting Xavier Legette, ADP 138. He's got the round 1 draft capital. I mentioned him in the show earlier. The Panthers traded up for him in round 1. He's probably starting week 1 in 3 receiver sets with Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. The big knock on Legette, it took him 5 years to break out in college. But a few things going for him and his situation. The offensive line in Carolina has been revamped, as I mentioned. I think Bryce Young's going to have a much more respectable season. The new head coach, Dave Canales, traded up for him in round 1. Then he traded up for Jonathan Brooks in round 2. These are his guys. I'm going to give Canales a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because he fixed Geno Smith in 2022 with Seattle. Then he fixed Baker Mayfield in 2023 with Tampa Bay. Will Carolina's offense be his 3rd time in 3 years that he works his magic? I'm betting on it. Get it, pick 138. It's a cheap way to find out. Marshawn Lloyd, ADP 142. He's got 3rd round draft capital, the new running back for the Packers. Josh Jacobs has a decently long injury history. And then Lloyd, the backup, he's 220 pounds. He ran a 4.46 40 time. He had 232 receiving yards last year on just 13 catches. He's got a big play threat anytime the ball's in his hands. He even played with Caleb Williams at USC last year, and he earned his trust. I think he does the same. I think he earns Jordan Love's trust in a Packers offense. I'm very bullish on being top 5 overall for the season in scoring. And if Jacobs goes down, Marshawn Lloyd should be a fantasy RB1 in this system. Last player, folks. I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. Who else is giving you 20 players to target in 20 minutes? I like wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, ADP 143, round 1 draft capital. He's got the elite offensive environment with the San Francisco 49ers. If anything happens to Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall could just take off, just like Deebo and Ayuk actually did when they both surged in their rookie seasons, especially late in the season when those fantasy points really matter. Pearsall's got decent size, great athleticism. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's a polished route runner. He's got sick hands. Kyle Shanahan's going to love this guy. I just have a hard time. It's just tough to see someone like Jawan Jennings stealing passing down snaps from a round 1 rookie, the caliber of Ricky Pearsall.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.